The Voidborn Council's judgment. The Shadowspire loomed over Kaida as if daring her to enter. The jagged mountain, carved from obsidian and ash, crackled with the weight of ancient power. Tendrils of black mist curled around its base, shifting like restless spirits. Above, the storm-choked sky pulsed with faint lightning, casting the path ahead in brief flashes of light. Kaida tightened her grip on her staff and turned to her companions, her voice laced with sarcasm to mask her unease. "So do we think the council will offer snacks, or are they more of a trial-by-fire kind of crowd?" Soren, walking beside her, didn't take the bait. His expression was as grim as the mountain itself. The council is not known for hospitality. Their focus is survival. Everything else is secondary. "Great," Kaida muttered. "Just what I wanted. Another group of judgmental old people trying to tell me how to live my life." Darian chuckled, though his crimson eyes remained sharp as he scanned the path ahead. "Don't worry, princess. If things get ugly, I'll break down the door and whisk you away. Very romantic." Kaida rolled her eyes. "You're not exactly Prince Charming, Horns." Rai, who had been trailing at the back, stepped forward with a dramatic flourish. "You hurt me, Kaida. Clearly, I'm the Prince Charming of this motley crew." "Prince Charming doesn't usually get kicked out of every court he visits," Leora muttered, her tone as sharp as her daggers. "Jealousy isn't a good look on you, Leora," Ray shot back, his golden eyes gleaming with amusement. Kaida raised a hand. "Focus, people. If the council's as terrifying as Soren says, I'm going to need you all to not kill each other while I'm in there." Soren stopped at the base of the massive obsidian gates that marked the entrance to the Shadowspire. The runes etched into the doors shimmered faintly, as if alive. He turned to Kaida, his expression grave. "This is as far as we go. The council demands privacy." Kaida frowned. "What, they're too good for spectators?" "Their judgments are absolute," Soren replied. "No interference, no allies, just you." Kaida glanced at the others. Leora nodded silently, her face a mask of calm. Darian's smirk was replaced with a flicker of genuine concern, though he quickly masked it with a lazy shrug. Ray gave her a small salute, his grin firmly in place. "Fine," Kaida said, taking a deep breath. "Let's get this over with." The gates creaked open, revealing a long, dark corridor lit by faint blue flames. As Kaida stepped inside, the doors closed behind her with a deafening boom, leaving her alone in the suffocating silence. The corridor opened into a cavernous chamber, its walls carved from black stone that shimmered faintly with magical energy. Towering pillars lined the space, their surfaces etched with runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. At the far end of the room sat the Voidborn Council, a semicircle of shadowy figures cloaked in darkness. Behind them, a massive obsidian throne loomed, its jagged edges radiating an aura of raw power. The orb at Kaida's side pulsed in response, as if acknowledging the throne's presence. "Kaida Arashi," one of the council members said, their voice echoing through the chamber like the toll of a bell. "Champion of chaos, you stand before us to be judged." Kaida straightened her shoulders, meeting their glowing gazes. "Judged for what?" "To determine your worthiness," another voice answered, softer but no less commanding. "The Orb of Equinox is not a gift. It is a burden, one that demands strength, control, and resolve. Tell us, champion, what makes you worthy to wield it?" Kaida hesitated. She thought of her battles, her victories, and the sacrifices she had made since arriving in this world. But none of those felt like the right answer. Finally, she said, "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be dragged into your world, to fight your war, or to carry this orb. But I'm here, and I'm not backing down. I'll fight because I have to, and I'll win because I can't afford to lose. That's why I'm worthy." A murmur rippled through the council, their eyes flickering like distant stars. "Determination alone is not enough," a third voice intoned. "You must prove yourself." Kaida frowned. "Haven't I already done that? Or do you need me to list all the times I've saved your people?" "The trials will decide," the first voice said. "Prepare yourself." The chamber dissolved into darkness, leaving Kaida standing in a void. The air around her was thick and heavy, and the faint sound of whispers surrounded her. She felt the orb thrumming at her side, its energy pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. A guttural growl echoed through the void, and Kaida turned to see a massive creature emerge from the shadows. It was a grotesque fusion of Voidborn and Lightbringer features, its body a mass of writhing tendrils and jagged golden armor. Its eyes glowed with malice as it lunged toward her. Kaida's battle foresight activated instantly, her vision sharpening as time slowed. She saw the creature's attack, a sweeping claw aimed at her chest, and dodged just in time, her staff glowing with dark energy as she countered. The creature roared, its tendrils lashing out in all directions. Kaida summoned a wave of dark energy with the orb, the Veil of Concord stabilizing the magic and amplifying its power. The blast struck the creature, forcing it back, but it recovered quickly, its movements growing more erratic. New skill unlocked, Entropic Surge, a burst of chaotic energy that disrupts enemy defenses. Kaida grinned, despite the sweat dripping down her face. Let's see how you handle this. The battle raged on, each exchange pushing Kaida closer to her limits. The creature was relentless, its attacks coming faster and harder. Kaida teleported behind it with Shadow Step, striking its exposed back with a surge of energy. The creature roared in pain but retaliated with a beam of golden light, forcing Kaida to raise a shield of dark energy. New skill unlocked, Harmony Shield, a defensive ability that balances opposing energies to neutralize attacks. With a final effort, Kaida summoned a massive wave of energy that enveloped the creature, tearing it apart. Its roar echoed through the void before it dissolved into shadows. The void shifted again, and Kaida found herself standing in her Tokyo apartment. The faint sound of anime played in the background, and the smell of instant ramen lingered in the air. It was painfully normal, except for the version of herself sitting on the couch, staring blankly at a flickering TV screen. "You don't belong here," the other Kaida said, her voice cold and hollow. "You're not a hero, you're a fraud." Kaida clenched her fists. "I didn't ask to be a hero, but I'm doing the best I can." The other Kaida stood, her eyes filled with disdain. "And how many people have died because of your best? How many more will?" Kaida flinched, the weight of her failures crashing down on her. She thought of the Voidborn soldiers who had fallen, the cities she couldn't save. But then she thought of Soren's unwavering faith, Leora's quiet loyalty, Darian's relentless support, and Rai's maddening but genuine encouragement. She thought of the people she had saved, the battles she had fought, and the lives she had changed. "I'm not perfect," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "But I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep fighting, because if I don't, no one else will." The other Kaida's expression softened, and she dissolved into light along with the apartment. Kaida returned to the chamber, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her resolve unbroken. The council watched in silence as she approached. "You have passed the trials," one of them said. "Your strength, resolve, and control are undeniable. The orb remains yours." Kaida exhaled a shaky breath, relief washing over her. "But beware," the figure continued. "The path ahead will test you in ways you cannot imagine. The fate of the Voidborn, and perhaps the entire world, rests on your shoulders." Kaida straightened, determination burning in her violet eyes. "Then I guess I'd better not mess it up." The council's eyes glowed brighter, and the chamber began to fade. Kaida felt herself being pulled back toward the fortress, her mind racing with the weight of what had just happened. The fall of Navarra, the scent of burning wood and blood choked the air, thick smoke curling through the shattered streets of Navarra. Once a thriving neutral city standing between the endless war of the Voidborn and the Lightbringers, it was now reduced to a smoldering graveyard. Fires flickered against the backdrop of collapsing buildings, and the screams of fleeing civilians echoed like the final breaths of a dying beast. Kaida sprinted through the chaos, the orb of Equinox pulsing frantically at her side, resonating with the destruction around her. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she skidded to a stop, scanning the battlefield with wide, frantic eyes. Bodies of Voidborn, Lightbringers, and Navaran citizens lay scattered across the blood-soaked cobblestone streets. And then she saw him. Alric! Kaida's voice cracked as she spotted him near the city's eastern gates, his robes torn, his face smeared with dirt and blood. He stood in the middle of the carnage, desperately weaving defensive spells to protect a group of civilians trapped behind him. His hands trembled, sweat dripped down his brow, but his eyes remained fixed with determination. A monstrous figure loomed beyond him. Kaida froze, her breath caught in her throat. The enemy, they were unlike anything she had ever seen before. Towering figures in crimson armor, their faces obscured by intricate masks that gleamed ominously in the firelight. Their bodies moved with eerie precision, as if every step, every motion, was dictated by some unseen force. Strange weapons hummed with unnatural energy in their hands, blades that flickered with red plasma and cannons that discharged eerie, silent pulses, each blast tearing through anything in their path. The second group, draped in silver-gray armor, were just as terrifying. Their forms moved with a cold efficiency that sent shivers down Kaida's spine. Unlike the brutal, overwhelming force of the Crimson Warriors, these soldiers fought with a precise, surgical grace, unleashing rapid, focused strikes that disassembled their enemies with chilling ease. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to eradicate. Kaida barely had time to react before the Crimson Warriors charged, their massive weapons slicing through the air with terrifying speed. Ulrich raised his staff, his voice hoarse from chanting spells. Void's embrace, he shouted, summoning a protective barrier of swirling dark energy around the huddled civilians. The barrier shimmered violently under the onslaught of attacks, cracks forming across its surface. Kaida bolted forward, but Soren's hand yanked her back. No, if you go out there now, we'll lose you too. I don't care, Kaida shouted, trying to break free. He needs us. Darien cursed under his breath, gripping his sword tightly. Kaida, if you die, everything ends. We have to be smart about this. Ulrich turned toward her just for a second and gave her a small, exhausted smile. Get them out of here, he called out, his voice breaking. And then the enemy struck. One of the silver-gray soldiers darted through the ruins, faster than the eye could follow. A spear of pure energy shot from their arm, piercing through Ulrich's barrier like it was tissue paper. Kaida watched in horror as the attack struck him square in the chest. Ulrich's eyes widened in shock, his mouth opening in a silent cry as the force of the blast lifted him off his feet and sent him crashing into the rubble. His staff clattered to the ground, dark energy flickering before dissipating into the night. No! The civilians Ulrich had been protecting scattered in panic, and the Crimson Warriors moved in, their heavy boots crushing debris as they advanced toward his fallen body. Without thinking, Kaida shoved Soren aside and sprinted toward him. She could hear Darien shouting behind her, Leora cursing, but she didn't care. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed, and her magic churned dangerously within her. The orb at her side pulsed, desperate for release. She dropped to her knees beside Ulrich, shaking him. Come on, stay with me. Blood stained his robes, his breathing shallow. His lips moved slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. You have to go, Kaida. No, you don't get to say that. Kaida pressed her hands to his wound, dark energy seeping out, failing to mend what was already lost. We can fix this, just stay awake. But his eyes began to dim, his face losing color. Kaida's hands trembled. Please don't. A shadow fell over them. One of the Crimson Warriors loomed above her, their energy blade raised high. Without thinking, Kaida's battle foresight activated, time slowing just enough for her to see the strike coming. She twisted, dragging Ulrich's body with her, the blade carving into the ground where they had been. A surge of rage unlike anything she'd ever felt burned through her veins. The orb pulsed with dark energy, and before she could stop herself, tendrils of pure shadow erupted from her body, lashing out with violent precision. New skill unlocked, Dark Reckoning, unleashes a surge of unstable dark energy, devastating everything in a short radius. The attack sent the Crimson Warriors flying into a burning building, collapsing, lapsing it in a shattered stone and fire. In the midst of the chaos, Kaida stands determined, her dark powers swirling around her as she prepares to fight. She looks on in horror as Ulrich no longer breathes, his fate sealed in the turmoil of the battlefield. Kaida gasped, staring at her own hands, the black energy still swirling around her fingertips, while unleashing her dark powers in a fight for survival. Kaida, move! Leora's voice snapped her out of it, and suddenly she was being pulled to her feet, Soren dragging Ulrich's body while Darian and Rai fought off the remaining enemies. The retreat was a blur. Kaida's world had narrowed to the weight of Ulrich's lifeless body, the screams echoing around her, and the pulsating ache of her own power. Back at the Voidborn Fortress, the air was heavy with sorrow. The survivors sat in silence, their eyes hollow, their spirits shattered. Kaida stood over Ulrich's body, her fists clenched at her sides. The healer's efforts had been in vain. He was gone. Soren placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll honor him. He died protecting what he believed in. Kaida's voice was barely above a whisper. It wasn't supposed to be him. It should have been me. Darian, uncharacteristically quiet, sat beside her. That's not how this works, Princess. He made his choice. We all do. Leora stood by the window, her face unreadable. Those factions, whoever they are, they didn't care about us, about the war. They had their own mission, and we were just in the way. Kaida's eyes darkened. Then we find out who they are, and we end them. Ray, leaning against the wall, spoke up softly. That's the Kaida I know, but we need to be smart about this. These guys aren't amateurs. Kaida exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. No more surprises, no more losses. We need to hit back and hard. Soren nodded. Then we prepare, we gather intel, regroup, and strike when the time is right. I won't let them get away with this. I swear it.